I'm Chris Sanderson, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and before we get started, I want to wish everyone a very happy and healthy new year. Believe it or not, 2026 is here, and we're kicking things off exactly the way we should with the return of the incredible Chris Sanderson. Chris is our first ever repeat guest, and as the co-founder of The Future Laboratory, a global leader in trend forecasting, consumer insight, and brand strategy, you can probably guess why. He joined us at the start of last year to walk through the Future 5 2025 predictions, and that episode quickly became a listener favorite. So today, he's back to unpack their new report, which will be crucial for success in 2026. New Codes of Luxury, elevating the guest experience in luxury hospitality with AI. Chris, thank you so much for being here again.
Oh, thank you, Katie, for inviting me back. It's great to know that I'm a listener favorite. That's making my years off to a great start.
You absolutely are. And I have no doubt this will be the same. I'm just so happy to get to start the new year with you again. And the new report that we're talking about today believes that AI offers brands a way to close luxury hospitality's innovation gap and redefine what service excellence means. You also stated in the report that the future role of artificial intelligence will be to connect data, context, and decision-making and give staff the real-time insights needed to take the guest experience to the next level. I mean, that is a lot right there. We have a ton to explore. Can you explain a bit about what that means and really what this report set out to do?
Yeah, of course. I think it was a really interesting report to have to research and then write. And I think the conclusions that we came to are really very, very interesting because, and interestingly, we've been doing a number of reports across different market sectors at the same time. So whilst we were looking at AI and its influence and its opportunity within hospitality and travel sector, I was also looking at this within the professional sport arena. So we've been looking at this across different market sectors. And there's one key insight that's come out from almost all of the work we've done throughout the year, which is how AI is going to really play this role as a leveler for many businesses. And I think this is a really important thing to remember, which is when we often look at brand new technology, all we can see is the cost. We think of it as being this huge sort of hurdle where we're going to have to find the money to invest in this new way of doing things that's going to cost us a ton and that we may or may not see the benefits of as an organization. And critically, I think what AI is already showing that it can do is very quickly, it can help your back of house teams to look at their operational costs and to save anything like 15% onto your EBITDA very, very quickly. As well as then offering you ways to actually develop tools and relationship models that actually also then increase the stickiness of your brand, that improve the way that you operate front of house, as well as the way that you operate from a logistics and an operational perspective. So there's all sorts of things. And in essence, this ability to level up is something that is having a huge impact on what you could call mainstream or middle ground players, because it's suddenly enabling them to play like they are a first level team. So when we looked at this within the professional sport capacity, for example, AI was providing all sorts of technologies that were enabling mid-range professional teams to have the kind of level of expertise that only those multi-million-dollar organizations could previously have had. And so this way in which, say, if you then move that into a luxury hospitality model, you start to think about how maybe a medium-priced 4-star hotel operation can suddenly actually dramatically offer some of the service touch points that you would expect to see in a 5-star hotel. This is, I think, one of the big things that we're going to see. And what we have really begun to uncover when we've looked at the hospitality industry in particular and the luxury hospitality sector specifically is that actually they are playing catch up. I cannot name you a single mainstream luxury hospitality brand, one of our big brands, those 5-star brands we all know with a global footprint, who actually are leading the way with their AI vision and strategy.
Why do you think that is?
I think they're all being a bit lazy, actually, to be honest.
Ooh, starting off the new year with some spice, Chris.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I think they're resting on their laurels. I think, as we all know, hospitality was very quick to market when the good old internet started up way back in 1995, etc. And they jumped on this platform that enabled them to have these endless streams of content sitting on this new thing called a www dot that enabled them to show off their properties around the world with limitless amount of visuals and then moving pictures, and allowed us to explore their properties in the kind of depth they'd never been able to do before. And of course, they've grown through that with algorithms and operational platforms that are helping them to book quicker, book better, and to, kind of increase their RevPAR and all these kind of things. But I think they've got so caught up in all of that they've actually failed to really address what AI is enabling them to do right here and right now, and also moving forwards into the second part of the 2020s.
Well, I'm really excited to hear what the report has found, because I think a lot of the listeners to this show are eager and excited about what AI can do. But I think we're still in the infancy of this technology. So hearing your predictions will help us to think a bit more critically about how we can apply them to our businesses. And before we jump into the actual findings, the report opens with some key stats, some really interesting ones. So I'm just curious, which did you find most surprising?
Yeah, so we commissioned FuturePol, which is our sort of quant division within the Future Laboratory and Together Group, to look at some survey responses from a selected group of individuals from both the US and the UK. So they were just specifically from those core markets who regularly spend over $450 on a hotel room as a nightly rate. So that was our key filter, to understand that upper echelon guest in terms of their expectations around a hotel stay. And I suppose one of the facts that I think pleasantly surprised me was that of those polled, 78% feel very positive about hotels introducing new innovations and technologies. And so I thought that was great to actually begin to understand that we've got a customer who here is actually really excited about the way that their hotel stay can change. And sure, they still want efficiency, they still want convenience, they want a seamless experience, and they want things to be human first. But the sense that they're really open-minded about the way that their hotel experience can continue to develop and change, I thought was really positive.
That's really exciting. So let's jump into the report. The first part is all about new luxury mindsets, perfectly segued after what you just said. And in the report, you state luxury hospitality has always strived to meet its guests' high expectations, but what today's luxury travelers want and what they're willing to pay for is evolving at a pace many brands are struggling to match.
Yes.
Talk to me about this section of the report.
Yeah, well, that was some research that we also pulled from Accenture, who put a figure behind that of 83% of luxury brand executives agree with that sentiment, that really what we're seeing is the way in which we as individuals are moving at a much faster pace than brands are actually. And I think that echoes that point I made earlier about the fact that I think the brands are playing catch up. I think they've been caught on the hoof by the way in which we've really, as individuals, looked at how TikTok and how other platforms have really changed the way that we think about entertainment and media, and the way that we shape our news, and the way that we gather information, and the way that we then disseminate that across our both professional and personal lives. And I think what's critical to this, of course, is that continued journey around experience and luxury. We all know that we're spending more and investing more in luxury experiences than luxury product. And so really for us, this is about the fact that luxury is no longer about what you have, but rather about how you live. So it's the way that we as affluent consumers are prioritizing travel, wellness, and connection over those classic material goods categories. And really channeling our spending into experiences that feel meaningful. And here's the key word, I'm sure I used it last year, transformative. And this, I think, is really pushing luxury and hospitality right into the center of the luxury ecosystem. Because, hotels and resorts and wellness destinations are the very places that are uniquely placed to curate the kind of immersive, lifestyle-driven moments that really help us to define who we are in this 21st century world. So that's a really critical point. And then following on from that, I think, is the continued role of discernment that, we continue all on our journey of self-actualization. We all know more. We understand brands better. We know ourselves more. And so actually being able to tell the difference is a really critical thing. And more, that's about authenticity and distinction. So that expression that we hear time and time again is the money can't buy experience. So we know that particular brands offer this as part of their brand promise. Especially with their key spenders. But more and more of us want to have that feeling or that sense of a money can't buy experience every time we travel. It's no longer about just expecting that on your honeymoon. You kind of want it with every single holiday and every single investment you make in time away. And as a result, increasingly, we want to go on a holiday, we want to stay in a hotel, or we want to create a trip that has a really clear point of view and where every moment of that trip has moments that reflect the local culture, that have a sense of creativity around them, that show us a sense of belonging so that we can appeal to our desire for being part of a community. And therefore, it's no longer just enough to be able to brag about a status trip where we've offloaded a lot of money to a particular hotel brand or resort that we know our colleagues and friends and family will have heard of. Actually, we want that trip to also be incredibly personalized to us, and also to have this idea of purpose, to be purposeful, so that it has real meaning for us. And then I think next up, in terms of the mindset shifts that we're seeing really come to the fore, is this idea of confidence, what we call confidence in care. Let's face it, the world has never been more crazy and tumultuous than it is right now. It's unpredictable. And so peace of mind is actually really, really priceless. And, that's why organizations continue to do so well, which is that we want considered planning. We want the safety in understanding what our trip is all about. And all of these kind of factors become hugely important. Logistics, safety, comfort. We want these things to be thought through, which is why, of course, agentic AI is continuing to grow in its importance, because we want that sense of the really high-end travel agency care, even if we can't necessarily afford it. So we want that feeling that everything's been anticipated, nothing's going to go wrong with our trip. And that, I think, is becoming really important. Reliability in our experience. And then finally is this idea of relationships that remember. It's this idea that whilst we may not want to be really obvious in our status when we travel, we might want to be under the radar, we might like to be quite quiet and discreet, we want to feel seen. We want actually to be recognized by those people that matter. And that might not be another guest. It's not that we want the other guests to recognize that we've got the key room in the hotel and we've got a trip that is really important, but we want the hotel to recognize us and recognize how important we think we are. So that sense of the relationship that we have with those providers, I think, is becoming more and more important. And so as guests, as customers, we're expecting brands to know when to lean in and to know when to step back. And the ones that can do that are the ones that are earning lasting loyalty, because I think ultimately tomorrow's guests are looking for seamless and meaningful interactions where recognition and ease and confidence in their own choices are really central to value. And the experience that we have when that is provided, I think, outweighs everything. And these kind of priorities start to set the stage for the way in which that relationship is going to build and develop, I think, in the future.
We've been talking about the experience economy for a decent amount of time now, but what I'm hearing you say is this is really no longer a trend, but kind of where the industry, where the world, where people are, period. And that subtle shift of wanting the experience to show off, to post on Instagram, to brag, and now going into what you talked about, under the radar, more discreet. It's not just about staying at the brand name hotel to stay at the brand name hotel, but because you believe that brand name hotel is going to offer you a more personalized, more intentional service than potentially you could get elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And we believe that's because we're moving through an experience economy into what we call the transformation economy. Hence the continued focus that we have on wellness, on longevity, and this focus on self and the ability to actually transform oneself into the optimized version of self that you really truly want to be. And that's not just about the idea of physically looking the best you can be. It's also about taking into account mind, body, and spirit. It really is this holistic approach of how we put all these things together. I mean, it was really, really interesting for this piece of research, and for one that we'd done earlier in the year, looking specifically at longevity. I spoke to Philippe Zuber, who's the CEO of Kerzner, and he said to me, Chris, the really important thing to remember here is that the greatest asset that any luxury individual has is themselves. You are your greatest asset. It's more than the houses you own, the cars you have, the watches you have, the art you have, or even your partner. You are your greatest asset. And so the more that we recognize that and start to think about how we look after ourselves and protect that asset becomes really important in this age of transformation.
It also takes it away from feeling selfish, right? Because it's like, well, I just need to take care of it. I need to take care of this the way that I would my other assets. So it almost gives you that permission slip of it's not self-indulgent for self-indulgence sake. It's because that is the basis for everything else going forward.
Absolutely. It's a really critical difference. And some people might kind of think, yeah, that's really just splitting hairs. But I do actually think that out of that kind of purposeful sense of identifying the time that you spend on your own self-improvement is actually relative to the development, not just of you in isolation, but also your role in a community and your role in society. So, the more that you can actually be focused as an individual to be at peace with yourself and to be content means probably as an individual, you're going to be able to spend a lot more time looking out and thinking about other people too.
Mm-hmm. Let's move into the second section of the report. And this all talks about the future AI frontiers. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so this is where we start to think about how brands can cater for these new and emerging luxury mindsets. And here we identified 4 major shifts that really are changing how guests discover, experience, and connect with brands. And the first really is around this notion of curated discovery. And it really is how AI is becoming luxury's new concierge. So this is already obviously a hot topic. It's how the idea of agentic AI and also intelligent services can help expand what guests can discover and also help keep recommendations aligned to the brand's tone of voice, its taste, and its sense of place. And so this critical role, I think, of curation is hugely important. Second, we've looked at this idea of what we've called seamless journeys, which is this idea of how when you start to identify friction as the enemy of flow within a holiday experience or a travel experience, it's how AI can enable effortless end-to-end travel, how it becomes the critical anticipator of need, how it solves problems in real time, a delay in, say, your train, or a hold up on a motorway, a freeway, which causes you problems to get to your destination, a dreaded flight cancellation, and how that puts out all of your connections. To have an agentic tool that is doing all of that heavy lifting for you the moment that there is a flight delay, that is starting to anticipate, okay, so Chris potentially is going to miss his next connection. So what are the alternatives? Do I start to contact the airline because he's got enough points and has a high enough rating with that airline to just get bumped onto the next available flight? Or because we know he's traveling at the back of the plane, he's got a cheaper seat, they're never going to put him onto the next flight. He's just going to sit on a cancellation list. what's going to be his cheapest alternative to just go ahead and buy another seat, so at least he gets to his end destination in time. Just imagine having all of that happening in the background while you don't even realize that potentially your flight is running 45 minutes late because you're the one person that's not being told anything because you're maybe sitting on the plane on the tarmac, not moving. So how all of these things can be going on in the background is one of the big game changers that we see that really then starts to create this calm, connected guest experience around you. It's like having the ultimate executive assistant at your fingertips. So that we think is going to be, again, a game changer. And then the third, of course, is this idea of personalization at scale, which, again, when we look at the luxury end of the hotel industry, we're used to ratios of maybe you get 5 members of staff to one guest when we talk at the Armands of this world, for example. And therefore, we expect this level where they know me by name. Every member of the guest team knows who I am, and they know what my proclivities are. They know what my tastes are. They know that I don't eat meat. They know I drink tea instead of coffee. They know I like sparkling water, et cetera, et cetera. So when I just sit down, the sparkling water just is there for me. I don't have to ask or be, kind of ask which I would prefer. But, when we start building personalization into those programs and we start to see brands that use real-time AI models to help those front of house individuals to understand guest taste and guest personalization preferences, this we start to can have a tremendous effect. This is why we talk about this leveling up of how a 4-star brand can start to behave like a 5-star brand. And that's where I think you move beyond basic preferences to create truly bespoke experiences for every single guest. Which is what every luxury hotel I know around the world still falls down with delivering. They all talk about the quality of their black books and their ability to treat each guest personally. But trust me, I have spent years talking to high net worth individual guests about the hotels they love the most. And I tell you, the reason they talk to me is they're all passionately in love with these hotels and yet whine and whine and whine about how badly they get treated. Because they turn up at a hotel having only stayed there 3 weeks ago to be greeted by some poor numpty on the desk who's only been there a week, who says, "Oh, it's so nice to have you staying with us. We do hope you enjoy your experience here." And the guest is kind of going, "What are you talking about? I was here 3 weeks ago. Where's the welcome back?"
Right.
So, and it's little things like that, as we all know, absolutely turn a hotel advocate into a hotel enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Then our final kind of theme within this particular part of the report is the idea of augmented hospitality. And this is when AI takes care of the admin and the background logistics. So it's that sense of how we will increasingly see roles change within a hospitality operations makeup, of how much AI will be able to do at speed and at a vastly reduced cost. And this is where it gets interesting. This is where either hotels start cutting staff like crazy and actually remove costs from their bottom line, or actually start to reinvest in those front of house staff members who actually have the space to be present, to be welcoming, to anticipate need, to solve problems, to be there with guests and create those genuine emotional moments that really start to define true luxury. And this is where I think we'll see a real parting of the waves in the way that we have with many retail brands who have used technology to actually just remove cost from their overall bottom line, and often deliver a reduced service to us as the end user, rather than actually think about how they augment the client experience or the shopper experience. But I think where we see the opportunity to remove friction and make stays more seamless and to drive service that feels personal and always distinctly on brand, I think is hopefully the way in which we think more hotel brands will go in the future. Let's wait and see.
There's so much to think about in that section alone, but I am obsessed with what you talked about with removing friction. And I'll give you an example of something that just happened to me. I am planning a trip with my husband and our 2 very young children to Key West. And so for me, friction in the travel experience right now is something that could preclude me from actually going because it might not be worth it if a trip is going to be too complicated. And usually around this time of year, we like to travel back to the UK because we used to live there and we miss it a lot. And because of what I just said, we decided instead we're going to go to Key West because it's a much shorter flight from New York. We can fly direct from LaGuardia, which is the airport that's closest to us, and avoid my most hated place in the world, JFK. All of these great reasons. We were able to get a really well-timed flight on miles through one of our credit cards. Great. Win, win, win. Well, on that same credit card that just increased their fees to an eye-watering amount, I used miles to book a rental car. And I chose to book it with a known name rental car provider because we all know what can happen when you go with one of the random car OTAs. And I wanted to request a car seat in the car when we arrived at the airport. And I was told by the car rental company that they couldn't do that in my reservation because it was made by a travel agency. And I was told by the credit card company or the travel agency that they were unable to make that change. So to me, as a traveler, to risk that I'm going to be traveling during one of the busiest times of year to an extremely family-friendly destination and just cross my fingers and hope that they have a car seat available for me, no way. So I canceled my booking with the travel agency. I booked direct through the car rental company where I can at least add onto my reservation online that I'm adding that car seat. But can I tell you the amount of time I've spent thinking, because I just know I'm going to show up at that airport and they're going to go, sorry, we're out of car seats and there's nothing we can do about it, right? So the idea that AI could come in and remove so much of the friction from the travel process is really exciting for the industry because that means people like me who are hesitant to travel sometimes because of my familial circumstances won't be anymore.
Yeah. No, you're so right. And if we move it to the broader picture and the opportunity, AI and biometrics is anticipated to take 2/3 out of our time spent where we are being processed as part of the airport experience. So on average, people spend 30 minutes at an airport being processed through security and through travel checks and passport control, et cetera, et cetera. All adds up to about 30 minutes.
And if it's at JFK, that's an hour and 30 minutes.
Of course. We'll make it 3.
Yeah.
Whereas, technologies increasingly are going to reduce that down to about 10 minutes because of the way that we're looking at biometrics and those kind of elements that identify us as to who we are. And that's all about removing friction from the journey process. Because friction in travel is a great thing when we want it. Friction is the exciting stuff that slows you down. Friction are the things that make you stop and look at something. But that's when we're in control of the friction, when we determine that these are the moments where we suddenly go, hey, stop, let's just stop and look at this because, this is being culturally alive. This is suddenly finding that, hey, this is a great thing to look at. This is a great thing to watch, as opposed to the negative friction that slows us down for all the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, final section of the report, part 3. It's titled Hospitality's Digital Transformation. Tell us about that part.
Okay, so this is where we start to explore how AI is redefining operational excellence and service for the future of luxury hospitality. And this is where we begin to understand, of course, not all brands are going to look the same or perform the same. And so we start to think about how both challenger and legacy brands, I think, are going to deal with the impact of AI. Because I think for new entrants, AI, as I've said, is a leveler up. It's going to represent a fast track to future advantage. Whereas I think for legacy players, a lot of them are actually going to be challenged by what this means. They're going to imagine these are hurdles that are going to cost them a lot, that are going to involve massive change in terms of their current structure and their operational hierarchies. And this shift, I think, is going to take a lot of time to integrate. And so I think this is why many larger brands are currently on the back foot with AI. They simply can't get their head around where to start, what it's going to do first, and they just think it's all going to be about problem and cost, and maybe also remove their jobs. So I think, this is where it gets really interesting. So for us, we identified kind of 3 key areas that we see as the kind of big takeouts moving forward. And the first is that AI really is going to be a driver of anticipatory service. So hospitality is shifting from reactive to proactive experiences where AI enables staff and systems to anticipate guest needs before they even arise. The stories, obviously, of how algorithms have been able to predict human behavior are legendary. They've been around for the last 25 years. As long as we've been doing market surveys and database collections on consumer behavior, you can understand that actually, as people, we are really easy to predict.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moment that we start to apply that to hospitality in a way that I don't think we have really before, in a way that retail has, if you think about a brand like Walmart, who absolutely, through its loyalty cards and programs, absolutely understands its customers really, really well and knows exactly kind of what life stage they're in and what their needs are and how they can target them with very specific offers and purchase executions. I think we're going to see the same happen within hospitality. So that's a really critical one, how we actually anticipate what our guest needs before they even know it. And then the second is this idea of intelligent systems that start to deepen human connection. So it isn't all just about the back of house. It isn't just about making the ordering of inventory quicker and faster and cheaper and removing cost from the bottom line. It's that technology's real value lies in enhancing empathy and understanding how using data to create genuine care and personalized moments is really important. It's not just about efficiency. That's really important, but I think these tools are really going to change the way that front of house teams can behave. It's their ability to live be able to send you a little message as somebody on a front desk and say, that person who's just arrived has had a really stressful journey. You should be able to see it on their face, but just in case you didn't notice, their flight was 3 hours delayed. They had a problem with their car hire because they didn't provide the car seat. And they also broke down on the way. So if you can just offer them something extra at check-in that's going to make them feel special, we're going to have won the day.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, job done.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that we know Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons and other brands deliberately give their front of house team the autonomy to make decisions of how to make our guest feel better. So, simple things like, I just wanted to send a pot of tea up to you in your room because you look like you've had a really stressful day. As you're just unpacking, have a cup of tea and some cookies on us.
It's such a simple thing that would bring me to tears.
Because it's not just about the gift of tea. It's the fact that the person turning up is saying, gosh, you look really stressed when you checked in. We just thought a cup of tea would, help just, ease you into your afternoon.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, hospitality, we believe, is going to be the blueprint for luxury innovation. So the way that the hospitality industry is going to respond to AI, we think is going to be a bit of an agenda setter for actually how other brands are going to need to respond. In the same way that when it got it right, hospitality really harnessed the power of the internet in a way that other brands were really late to market with. If you think back to retail was really bad about selling online in the first instance because they were all terrified and didn't really understand about what it would do to bricks and mortar. So can you remember all those debates that businesses had about online selling?
And also about Amazon, especially the luxury fashion brands. It was like, no way am I ever going to sell on Amazon. And now
exactly,
they all have shop
exactly.
Front.
So, so I think luxury can actually show the way forward, and AI-driven models can point to a broader transformation across luxury industries, from one-off transactions to this idea of continuous relationship-based engagement. And this is where I think it gets really exciting. I still cannot find, as a case study, a hotel brand that really is starting to offer me end-to-end engagement through a digital device that I want to connect with on a regular basis, that is actually thinking about me as a continuous customer. Most of them still only regard me as a customer the moment I make a booking or when I walk through the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
And that is nuts in the 21st century. I should be having a relationship with my hotel brands of choice every week. They should be sending me kind of messages, engaging with me in conversation, helping me to think about what some of my next planning might be for the next year, maybe just asking me questions about my previous trip, looking at what I'm posting on social to work out if there's anything that they can help me with, whatever it is, building a 365 relationship is the next big, I think, touchstone for luxury, specifically luxury, but hospitality brands in general. Because again, the whole point is the leveling up that so many more brands are going to be able to behave like a luxury brand at very little extra addition to cost because of AI.
You referenced earlier speaking with Philippe from Kerzner, and I thought it was super interesting that this report was not only created by you guys at the Future Laboratory in partnership with Together Group, but you also consulted with some of the top names in the industry, like you just mentioned with Philippe, or the Global Chief Brand and Marketing Officer for Mandarin Oriental, or even the co-founder of Black Tomato, Tom Marchant, who's been a guest of this podcast as well. Why was it so important for you to bring in these thought leaders in the process? And did they share anything surprising along the way with you?
That's such a great question. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, look, as a future-facing organization, we don't conduct focus groups because our perspective is that we already know what the customer knows. So what can the customer teach me that I don't already know? So I'm not really interested in talking to average consumers, but we want to talk to either super consumers, those people who are really doing what most consumers aren't doing. So that small group of early adopters who sit at 15% of that being ahead of the curve of the main drift of how consumers approach newness and look at new ideas. So I'd either be talking to early adopters or, of course, industry experts. And as a business that at its heart behaves, because most of us were, as journalists, we're constantly thinking from an editorial perspective. So, when you pitch an idea to your editor says to you, well, what's the hook? What's the hook of this story? Why are my readers going to read it? And then they'll say, well, prove to me that this is of interest. And in order to do that, you go out and you interview people. And it's the same thing. In order to demonstrate, we look at the statistics and the analysis on the numbers that might show that the market is moving in this way. But I'd also want to be able to reach out to somebody like Alex Schellenberger, who's the Global Chief Brand and Marketing Officer at Mandarin Oriental, to ask him about what his perspective is on AI and what are they doing at Mandarin Oriental to look at implementing AI strategy within their organization. And, that's when he will start to talk to me a bit about the fact of how they're looking at harnessing AI to create more personalized experiences for their guests, where the data travels across different touch points, as he put it. So that's what we're constantly looking for, is that deeper understanding of how a market is shifting and how an understanding of market can really help us to write the kind of reports that we pull together.
Mm-hmm. And any insights that came from those conversations that you completely didn't see coming?
Yeah, I think when it comes to some of the quotes that we received, I mean, I've kind of said it before, but I just think she said it so succinctly. So we spoke to Tamara Lohan, who's one of the founders of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the kind of high-end fix-it travel agency and website portal that helps you to find great deals for amazing hotels. And she said, I do hope that AI finally allows us to personalize property properly. We've been playing around the edges, but never at the individual level. And that's about to change. And I think she really has identified certainly the way that they're moving, which is their ability to look at each and every single one of their clients and their users and start to put packages together that anticipate their need is where the market's going. I think what Tamara Lohan, who is one of the founders at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, really neatly identified was the way in which AI is going to allow us to personalize property. And she said, we've been playing around the edges, but never at the individual level. And that's about to change. And that really is, I think, a really important insight. Personalization at scale. Luxury has been about that kind of ratio that offers a very small percentage of high-paying guests this sense of being special and being treated like a rock star. And the big shift is going to be that all of us are going to be able to enjoy that rock star moment because of personalization at scale.
If you had to summarize the key takeaways of this report, what would they be?
Well, for me, as I've said, it would be this idea of get ready for a huge amount of leveling up. This idea that 4-star brands and even 3-star brands are going to be able to behave like 5-star brands, that AI will be the driver of anticipatory service, that intelligent systems aren't just going to save us money, but they're going to deepen human connection. And that actually, I think hospitality is going to be the blueprint for luxury innovation. It's going to show the way forward across the luxury sector.
Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to give us such incredible insights into this year ahead. Before you go, you know well, I like to ask every guest the last 3 questions. And I know you have some fresh new answers for me this time. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. And the first question I want to ask you is, what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had, different from the one you gave me last time?
Well, I can't even remember what the last one was, Katie. So I'm just going to tell you about the most recent, which is I have just come back from staying at a much visited hotel for me, which is Aman Gala, which is the Aman property in Galle in the southwest of Sri Lanka. And it was phenomenal. It's one of my favorite hotels in the world. The level of service was just sublime. And just the whole pace of my 4 days there was all wonderful. I enjoyed it, every moment of it from start to finish.
4 days is fast coming from the UK. I love that the pace there was slow because the actual trip was very short. Second question for you. What was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
Well, that was also on that trip where I'm going to name and shame Etihad for, I think, a truly appalling level of customer service when I got treated as a business class passenger as if I was traveling economy. I just couldn't quite believe the peremptory way in which I was treated when things went wrong, and the utter disregard that their teams had for I think were really quite simple questions and things they could have solved if they treated me like a business class passenger, which I was.
And final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, a person, or a brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Okay, I'm also going to refer to a recent experience. As I'm sure you know, I speak at quite a lot of conferences globally, and I have had the great good fortune over the last decade to work with Design Hotels, the collection of independent hoteliers that's now part of the Marriott Group. But I've worked with them for a number of years, and I speak at their yearly event called Arena. And this year it was held in Bolzano in the Südtirol, which was an amazing location. But for me, being surrounded by some of the world's most unique, creative, and genuinely hospitable hoteliers was just a mind-blowing experience. People who spend their lives working night and day to give other people the most fantastic hotel experiences was just incredible. You really cannot take hospitality out of a hotelier. Something goes wrong at a restaurant, and it's not even their restaurant, and they are bending over to pick up a broken glass or a knife that's dropped on the floor. It's amazing to watch people who just have hospitality oozing out of every part of their body, who genuinely want to make great experiences for people, and being surrounded by them was just awesome. I learned so much.
Chris, thank you so much for coming back and for starting 2026 off right for us.
Well, Katie, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure again. Here's to a great 26. Let's hope we all have a fantastic year in travel and hospitality.
All right, everyone. It's time for today's sweet summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. What a blast it was to have Chris Sanderson back on the show. For anyone interested, I'll link last year's predictions from Chris in the show notes. But I just love kicking off a new year with some fresh predictions and, dare I say, some spicy hot takes. If this episode made anyone slightly uncomfortable, that's kind of the point. Chris doesn't deal in safe predictions or polite pats on the back. He's here to challenge assumptions, call out complacency, and help us prepare for what's actually coming. He opened with a provocative claim. He can't think of a single mainstream 5-star hospitality brand with a truly global footprint that's leading the way in AI. When I asked him why he thinks this is, his explanation was blunt: laziness, resting on laurels rather than pushing the category forward. But it's not all doom and gloom. In fact, Chris believes luxury hospitality won't just become a leader in AI, it will set the standard for what thoughtful innovation looks like across the broader luxury landscape. Chris believes AI will be the great leveler, giving 4-star brands the tools to elevate their offerings in ways that were previously out of reach, which naturally begs the question: if AI raises the floor, what will luxury brands, 5- and 6-star operators, do to raise the ceiling? Guests are far more open to this evolution than many brands may assume. According to research from the Future Laboratory, 78% of respondents felt positive about the introduction of new technology into the hotel stay. And that tracks because, as Chris pointed out, humans tend to move faster than brands when it comes to adopting new technology. I get his point. For example, humans started using social media first, and because of that, brands created social media accounts and later strategies and then teams to take those channels seriously. AI is simply the next chapter in that pattern, only with far greater implications. AI will reshape how guests discover, experience, and connect with hospitality brands. It will give operators a choice: take those efficiencies and cut costs, or reinvest them back into the front of house, empowering staff to deliver the kind of hospitality no algorithm could ever replicate. Most compellingly, Chris predicts it will remove friction from the travel experience, the bad kind anyway. Really, technology shouldn't be distancing us from our guests. It should evolve the relationship from transactional cycle of booking, stay, and post-checkout communication into something far more continuous and meaningful. So, as we're brainstorming new uses for AI in the year ahead, perhaps we should just run every idea through the filter Chris uses as a former journalist. What's the hook? Why does it matter to my guest? Why would they care? And then let's prove it. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media @sweetsuccesspodcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.